But what I'd first like to do is give a basic introduction to how the world has changed. In other words, why is it important that we really look to globalize our curriculum? And so I'll do that for a little bit and then talk about the resources that we have. And after I finish the conversation, please, my contact information would be up. I would love to speak with any of you that you have questions for resources that we have. It was my pleasure to actually start the community college initiative at Worldview 10 years ago when I came, so it's my baby and it's what I love to do, so I would love to work with you after I finish. I was born in North Carolina, so I like to tell stories, so I will start out with a story. Actually, keeping with our international theme, it's back in the old days of the Soviet Union when they had these massive factories, and there was a worker every day when the whistle blew at 5 o'clock, he pushed a wheelbarrow through the gates leaving the factory. And the guards always came down and checked to see if he was stealing anything. They would look under the wheelbarrow, around the wheel well. If there was, sometimes they'd have a tarp over the wheelbarrow. They always checked under the tarp. They never found anything. This went on about 3 months, and then they realized he was stealing wheelbarrows. Okay. So the moral of this story is that the guards had a narrow perspective. They were looking for contents instead of container, and for parts and missed the whole. And my argument today is going to be that one of the major challenges for us as Americans today is to develop a broader perspective in looking at the world. Or we might fall behind in the international system that we really created, that we helped create in the world. As Dr. Scott said, I'm from a program called Worldview that was established 16 years ago at UNC, and we're a public service program, and our basic mission is to connect the K-12 schools and community colleges with all of the international resources at UNC. We also work with Duke and NC State so that you can become more global in focus. And my message today is that with globalization, the world has changed in a fundamental way. And if we don't prepare our students for this new world, we're really limiting them. Globalization impacts job prospects, health, physical security, public policy, communications, investment opportunities, and community relations. It's deeply transforming the lives and the context of the lives of people around the world. And those who are educated to understand those transformations can turn them into sources of comparative advantage, and they will benefit from globalization. But those who do not are going to face real and continuing challenges. And the same is true on a national level. So here are, at a conference at Bloomington, Indiana, these are reasons that we really need to develop global education, global competence in our students. And when I speak of global competence, what do I mean? There are a lot of different definitions of global competence. This is one that I pulled from a recent NEA report. And as you read it, you'll notice it's 4 basic elements: international awareness, appreciation of cultural diversity, proficiency in foreign languages, and globally competitive skills. And I have the fuller slides if you have questions about this later. And I forgot to say, as I speak, if you have a question, please go ahead and interrupt me. I'll be glad to continue the discussion in that way. I've made that offer, and sometimes I didn't get a third through my presentation, but it turned out to be a more enjoyable presentation for the audience. So please interrupt me as you wish. So as I mentioned, I want to do 2 things today. First, I'm going to lay out what has changed in the world that makes global competency so important for our students today. And to accomplish this, I'm going to look briefly at the international system. And a lot of this is going to be stuff that you know, but I want to just kind of get that so we all have a common area to start the discussion. I'll also look at the future, what's going to happen in the next, say, 20, 30 years, and how this really makes it even more important that our students become globally competent. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to introduce the resources that we have at Worldview to work with you. And the idea is not to add something else to your plate. I mean, as far as I can tell, community college instructors are probably the busiest educators in the state. So the idea is to help you more or less seamlessly integrate this into your instruction rather than adding on something new to do. Now, for the first part, I'm going to draw from writers like Thomas Friedman. I'm sure you've heard of him. Fareed Zakaria, Fernando Reimers, and Yong Zhao. These are writers about globalization and global education. So what do we mean when we talk about globalization in the current international system? Now, Thomas Friedman contends that globalization is the international system that has replaced the Cold War system. And I'm glad to see there are a lot of you in this room that are old enough like me to remember the Cold War. The Cold War system was characterized by division. The world was a divided up, chopped up place, and both your threats and your opportunities came from who you could keep yourself protected from, who you could separate yourself from. There are a lot of state-controlled economies. People and money stayed behind closed walls, and information was tightly controlled by governments. For example, there was a story back in the Cold War where there was the main newspaper in Soviet Russia showed a line in New York, and what it was people lining up to get the fresh bagels on Saturday morning. But the headline was "Starving Americans in Line for Bread." All right? Well, you could do that back in the day before the internet. That can't happen anymore. And it was really the internet that broke down a lot of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. So money and people stay behind protective walls. But in stark contrast, in the globalization system, the defining feature is integration. The world has become an increasingly interwoven place, and today, whether you're an individual, a company, or a country, your threats and your opportunities, your ability to thrive or not thrive, really depends on who you can get connected to. So we've really gone from a system built around division and webs and walls, to one built around integration and webs. With globalization, individuals, corporations, and nation states can reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before. And it brings the world into our lives in ways never imagined by previous generation. So the world is really in your life whether you are welcoming it or not. So how did this happen? Friedman and other writers describe globalization as the flattening of the world. And so the world is flat in the sense that globalization has leveled the competitive playing field between the emerging market countries, the third world as we used to call it, and the developed world. Also, technology and geopolitical developments have created a platform for global, around-the-clock collaboration. And I was in international business. I finished teaching Chinese at University of Illinois. I think it was about 1995. I started international business, and I really saw this platform come into being during that period. My first couple years in international business, we did business with faxes. We had one person, and her whole job was simply copying faxes and making books of faxes. And that sounds like a whole other world now, but that's how fast things have changed. And a number of you have probably read Friedman, but and I'm not going to go into detail, but he lists 10 flatteners that took us from really the Cold War to the globalized world. And some of them are, of course, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the internet, workflow software, outsourcing, offshoring, and supply chains. And since The World is Flat was written, which was about 10 years ago, we've seen the rise of social media and information technology entering the big data era. Process power and data storage are becoming almost free. Networks in the cloud provide global access and pervasive services. And these are working for both good and bad. You've noticed, if you've been in the news, ISIS is very skillfully using social media and big data to recruit and to further their evil around the world. So the result of these changes has been a web-enabled global platform for multiple forms of collaboration, sharing data, sharing knowledge, that really is irrespective of distance, increasingly of geography, and some people will argue language. I would not agree with that, and I can, with my experience, when I was in international business, some people would say, well, it doesn't really matter, you're going to have Chinese translators. Well, the factory owners did not speak English, and it was very effective to be able to speak to them in Chinese and not have to go through a translator. And we got a lot of business simply because I spoke Chinese and understood the culture. So I'm a big proponent of language. And we found that students that take language, even if they don't become fluent, through the act of learning another language, learning another culture, through taking this language, it changes the way they deal with other cultures. So fluency doesn't have to be the final goal. So I think, I'm a big proponent of that. So after the fall of the Berlin Wall, continuing our little history lesson, the Soviet economic model of state-controlled, closed economies, and if you think about it, that was India, China, Russia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, Central Asia, all at the same time began to open up their economies. And all of these people came onto the economic platform. So we're talking about 3 billion people have moved from closed economies to a global one. And these are our collaborators and our competitors. And many of these writers argue that this convergence is the most important force shaping politics and economics in the early 21st century. And it's the world into which our students are now graduating. And it really requires a new set of challenges. And if we look at the way the system is going to trend in the next 20, 30 years, it only increases this need. What I did is I created just 2 slides from a large report called Global Trends 2030. And this is the latest report by the National Intelligence Council in Washington. The NIC serves as a bridge between the intelligence, policy, and military communities. And so every 4 years, it publishes an update of global trends that try to tell us what are going to be the key drivers and developments that are going to shape world events in a couple of decades into the future. So I'll show you a couple of these slides. By 2030, there will not be any hegemonic power. Power is shifting, and by then will have shifted into networks and coalitions in a really, truly multipolar world. The US, European, and Japanese share of global income is projected to fall from its current level of 56% today to well under half by 2030. By 2020, emerging markets' share of financial assets is projected to almost double. Middle classes everywhere in the world are going to be greatly expanding and rapidly expanding, both in absolute numbers and in the percentage of their country's population. So we're really looking at a rapidly growing middle class across the world. Now, if you think there was a lot of global migration now, global migration is poised to become even more globalized as rich and developing countries suffer from workforce shortages due to aging populations. And there are a lot of, I won't get off the topic too much on that, but it's an interesting area of study. Of course, in countries like America and Japan, we're aging, but we are rich countries, so we have the, at least some of the resources to deal with this. One of the most interesting things to watch is going to be China. Because of the one-child population in China, they have created an aging population. They limited it to one child. Also, they were more lax in the countryside because they felt the farmers needed more workers, so they've got an imbalance. They've actually limited the better educated urban population while the undereducated country population has expanded. So they're going to have to deal with an aging population without being a fully developed rich country. So that's going to be something we need to watch on the world stage. Demand for food and water is expected to rise at least 35%. 35% for food, 40% for water. Half the world's population will live in areas experiencing severe water stress. So everybody's worried about oil. Water's going to be the big liquid that everybody talks about in the next 30 years. Fragile states in Africa and the Middle East are most at risk for experiencing food and water shortages, but China and India are also vulnerable. And if you think about how this impacts the things you read about in the newspaper, you think about Ebola. Basically, that is because of these shortages and because of lack of infrastructure. You think about ISIS. In the countries involved in that, the unemployment rate is 45%, and it's among the youth. So you've got young men that can't get married, can't move on with their life. They sit around smoking, drinking, and thinking about how bad their life is. So there's an economic, backstory to all of this as well. It's a fascinating report. If any of you are interested in getting more of it, I'll be glad to give you the link for that. So what does this mean for us and our students? From the first slide, there's actually, if you haven't read it, have any of you read this book, The Post-American World? Well, that's good and bad. Yeah, good, okay. Basically, Fareed Zakaria, who I think is a really good writer, he has anticipated a lot of these issues in this book. And what he talks about is, while America is going to remain a political and military superpower well into the future, in other areas, industrial, financial, educational, social, cultural, the distribution of power is moving away from the West, away from America, and becoming more balanced in the world. We're moving into what he calls a post-American world, one defined and directed from many places and by many people. Now, it's not a question of America's decline, and America will remain the military power, but it's about the rise of everyone else. And if you think about it, it's really inevitable. At the end of World War II, our relative power in the world was equal to the Roman Empire. We did 60% of the world production. We controlled 80% of oil reserves. So from that point, there had to be a balancing. And what I'd like to do now, show you a short 4-minute video called 200 Countries, 200 Years, 4 Minutes, that kind of graphically shows you this change I'm talking about, but both on the health and the economic fields.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
Most of the global growth then, well into the 21st century, is going to be driven by Brazil, India, and others, not the old guard of developed countries. And what that means, and there's just a slide showing that figure, that really most of the growth is going to come from the emerging market countries. That's really not something to get worried or excited about. It's really natural because if you think about it, economic growth comes from building infrastructure. You build roads, highways, you educate people, take them off the farm, and you put them to work. And then you have, there we go. Let's see. Oop, went right ahead. That's the slide I was talking about. So most of the countries in the developing world are still in the stage where they're building infrastructure, they're taking people off the farms, putting them to work, and growing very rapidly. The final stage is innovation, and that's really where America really leads the world. And that is probably, not probably, but that, if you read the articles, books about global competition, that's where we can excel and continue to excel, is to continue to, think Apple, think of things like that, to work. But what's happening then, as we saw in the global trends, with this growth, with this rapid growth, we've got major middle classes popping up all over the world. And this is a huge opportunity for us as a country. But it means the U.S. has to see globalization as offering places to sell rather than to supply. For the first stage of globalization, we really saw we were really the engine that drove world globalization. We were the people that bought all of these cheap goods that were produced around the world. That kept the price down, kept our living standard low in America, but it overextended our budget and is causing problems. So we really, in the second phase, need to look more at selling our products overseas and taking advantage of this market. So to sum it up, 20th century economic globalization was a supply-seeking enterprise for Americans. 21st century economic globalization will be more of a market-seeking enterprise for Americans. So the question for us is, can American producers offer products, services, and solutions that others in the world want? And in my mind, the answer is a resounding yes. But we need the global competencies. Most U.S. companies expect the majority of their growth to be in overseas markets, which means they will increasingly require a workforce with international competence. And North Carolina is really already very much engaged in the global economy. Just two quick slides. We've got already over 700 foreign-owned corporations that employ about 250,000 of North Carolina citizens right now. We also export, in 2012, about $29 billion. 1/5 of all workers in North Carolina in manufacturing depend on exports for their jobs. That's the 2011 data. We sell to over 200 countries. The biggest buyers are Canada, China, Mexico, Japan, and Germany. And I just actually had a conversation with a woman that works for the North Carolina State. She goes around the world looking for markets. And she just got back from Asia, and she was going, wow, in Asia, they're crazy about golf and basketball. Where do we have the best golf and basketball in the world? North Carolina. So, I mean, that's a huge opportunity. We just have to make the connection and instill the skills in our students to go out and be good sellers. I mean, my first, because I went from, academia to business, and it was really baptism by fire, and my first boss was a screamer, so I learned in a very painful way. But the first thing he said, if you want to buy products, English is good. If you want to sell your products, you're going to have to work with other languages and understand other cultures. So that's a lot of what I'm trying to say. So, and then one more report from it was a U.S. Committee for Economic Development. They're saying to compete successfully in the global marketplace, not just U.S. multinational companies, but even small businesses increasingly need employees with knowledge of foreign languages, cultures, global competencies to market their products to consumers around the world and to work effectively with other people in the world. Here's a quote from Honeywell, and there's a million of these saying about how important this is. It's really a skill we must give our students. Now, I've spoken basically about economic advantages, and while the economic advantages that accrue to global competency have received more attention than the civic advantages, global competency is really helpful not only from an economic standpoint, but as a cornerstone of democratic leadership and citizenship. With the issues we saw in the second global trends slide, food, water, energy pressures, increasing global migration, we see how increasingly we're going to have to go beyond our border to solve the major problems facing us in our lives. When China imports timber from Indonesia, it's exporting deforestation. When Brazilians replace forests in the Amazon region with coffee fields, they're affecting global temperatures. When the United States sends its manufacturing industries overseas, we're also sending pollution overseas. So we're all really closely interconnected. And solving these problems is going to require international cooperation among governments, professional organizations, corporations, and individuals. And in politics, I mean, we know on both sides, the right and left, Democrat, Republican, they all play fast and loose with global facts. They basically see the world as a way to get votes. And it's up to us to really know what the truth is, because we're not going to get it from the media too much or from the politicians. So really, we have to be informed on issues like trade, health, epidemics, environmental conservation, energy use, immigration, and global stability. So this is very important. So to sum up, our students are graduating into a world that's completely different from the one that I graduated into when I graduated from Carolina. They're going to be selling to the world, buying from the world, working for international companies, managing employees from other cultures and countries. They're going to be collaborating with other people in joint ventures, competing with people on the other side of the world, and they're going to be tackling problems that are now local and global. And they need to vote as informed citizens, and that's now a part of the equation. But studies show that the K-12 system that's sending their students to you, the system in America is behind the 9 other industrialized countries in terms of global education. The good news is that North Carolina is actually one of the top states in global education, so you are getting a little bit better. But it's really going to be the key to our state and our country's economic future is going to be getting these students to have these skills. I want to end on a positive note of this part of I've had a lot of kind of, not bad news, but sobering news. I have found in my experience overseas, and I really, never, if you don't count Canada, I had not been out of North Carolina until I graduated from college. And then I just flew all the way over to Asia to learn Chinese. What I found then, with years and years teaching and doing global business is that the world is a very willing partner, particularly when they see Americans that are interested in their culture and wanting to communicate with them. And a story I tell, when I was first learning Chinese, I guess I'd been there, enough to be dangerous, but not really to speak quite well yet. This was about 2 or 3 months. And my teacher taught me a phrase called 久仰, and it means, I've heard a lot about you, it's an honor to meet you. It's a rough translation. And I thought, that's incredible. 2 syllables, and it says all of that. I'm going to use that the next time I get a chance. Sure enough, about 3 days later, I met this esteemed Chinese poet, an elderly gentleman. So I thought I was shaking his hand, and I thought I was saying 久仰, but I was saying 酱油, which is soy sauce. So I was shaking his hand going, soy sauce, soy sauce, soy sauce. Well, when they finally figured out what I was doing, they laughed until they had tears in their eyes. But the fact that I was willing to make a fool of myself to learn their language and learn their culture, we have a bond that lasted our whole lives. So I'm very, very encouraged about the possibility for what we have ahead of us. Well, what I want to do now with the time I have left is just briefly go over some of the resources that we have. Dr. Scott already talked about our mission, so this is the Worldview mission. Now, our main partner in our work are the National Resource Centers at UNC. I would say at Duke, but our strongest partner at Duke just didn't get refunded. And I'll tell you about that. So anyway, National Resource Centers, these are basically the departments, the Department of East Asian Studies, Latin American Studies, African Studies. Then they apply to Washington, to the Department of Education, for Title VI funding. If they get it, then they are branded as a resource center, an area resource center, which means that they have an obligation to work with the educators in their state. And they go on 4-year cycles. They're funded on 4-year cycles, and you have to be renewed every 4 years. And every 4 years, they have an invitational priority. And for the last 2 cycles, one of the priorities has been working with community colleges and globalizing the community college curriculum. So they are ready to work with you. And some of my roles at Worldview is I work with the National Resource Centers, and I do the community college. And so they are really, really excited about some of the work we're doing, and they put it in their funding. The bad news is, of our 9 centers, we didn't, because of the mess in Washington, they're about 4 months late, and of the 9 centers, 6 got funded. So that's still, I think, the ones that were funded. I won't go into that, but it doesn't matter. My point is, you have these centers across the universities that have innumerable global resources, films, speakers, advice that they can work with you, any project that you want. So as you're thinking about what you might want to do, give me a call. I'll be glad to put you in touch with the area of the world that you would like to work with. Now, what we actually do, the heart of our mission is professional development programs. And we do about 8 to 10 professional development programs a year. We hold most of them in Chapel Hill, but we're doing some now with community college out in the state. We're going to do, I'll talk in a minute about our Global Distinction Initiative, and we're going to do our workshop at Central Piedmont pretty soon. So these professional development programs, we just bring the leading scholars from UNC, Duke, NC State, NC Central, from military, NGOs, business, and we go into the major global issues. We've talked about, in these past programs, we've talked about global health, innovation and technology, peace and conflict, population and migration. This coming November 12th and 13th, we're going to be looking at the global economy. So the goal of these symposiums are to introduce the faculty to major global issues and then to give you the skills to integrate those into your classroom. So we have major plenary presentations, panels, and then we have breakout sessions where we work on ways to integrate this into your classroom. So that is the main program every November. We have the K-12 symposium in October, and then the community college symposium always in November. And so I've made slides. So this is the, I'm going to kind of stay here and look at this as I talk. So this is that. Now, every February, I started this 3 years ago, because in 2007, once we kind of got all our community college partners going, I really thought the best focus we could do at UNC is to work on helping instructors globalize their curriculum. So that's been a focus, and we actually started grants, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I started a program that every February we just come together, have a hands-on workshop, and work on different ways to globalize the curriculum. This particular one, I was reaching around for a slide yesterday. This is actually the one we did 2 years ago where we collaborated with the Red Cross, and it was on humanitarian law. So that's something we do every February. It's usually a day program in Chapel Hill, working on globalizing your classes. And the spring seminars, these are held every March. The first one is always Latin America and North Carolina. We started this our first year. We thought it was going to be a one-year program. There was such a big response, we do it every year. The point of this program is to help educators rise to the opportunities and the challenges of the increasing diversity in their classrooms. Particularly in K-12, we have school systems and schools across the state that 15 years ago were completely lily white. Now they are 50% Latino. And so it's a huge challenge for the teachers. And we have a number of community colleges that are also working with Latinos. So this is a program to look at the culture of the countries that are sending us their students, the cultural aspects of the students, and then we model best practices from across the state and across the nation to help them succeed. Things like working with parents, working with students, cultural differences, as I'm sure many of you are aware with. For example, my son was, I was an athlete growing up. My son was an athlete, so I was a coach. And as I was coaching basketball, one of the things we did was teach these young men, when I'm speaking with you, you look in my eyes. Because I'm your coach right now. These are like 11-year-old boys. I'm your coach right now, but in a few years, it's going to be your employer. Well, a lot of the Latino countries, it's an insult for them to look directly into your eye. So that's just one cultural difference that it's important to learn about. Then what we do, this is back-to-back. So we start at 8:30 on Tuesday morning. We go a day and a half with Latin America, break for lunch, and then we switch to the second seminar. The spring seminar is always on a different region of the world. And it's the destination of our summer trip. So basically what happens is you come to the seminar. Before the seminar, you get readings about that area of the world. You get papers you can do for professional development credit. Then you do a day and a half working in the seminar. Then, not the whole group, because we usually get like maybe 200 at the seminar, but then we take 25 to 30 to that destination. And we study the educational system. We study major issues in that country. Then we come back and we do a follow-up workshop to help the educators integrate that into their curriculum. In the summer, we do a Global Education Leaders Program. What we do there is we try to identify administrators, in some cases teachers that want to go into administration, that we think could be global leaders in the next 20 years. And it's a week-long intensive crash course in globalization where you come, you stay in Chapel Hill, and we have a faculty of about 35 that go at you for a week. And it's a great program. It's my favorite program because we really get to know the educators during that week. This year, these are our we go to two different places because we offer our partners get first choices, and we've got so many partners now we need to do them. It turns out that, and this is unusual for us, but we're going to the Galapagos Islands. It's more of a STEM focus because UNC is one of the few, if not the only, university that has a research center in the Galapagos Islands. So we're doing that. And we go to different places, like we went to Japan last year. I took a group to the Balkans 2 years ago. We've been pretty much everywhere. But then we always go to Costa Rica. This year it's going to be Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And it's a different type of trip. It's Spanish immersion. Even if you don't speak Spanish, you live with the host family. You're immersed in Spanish. And you stay in one village, one town the whole time, whereas now we're going to go to Nicaragua for 3 days. I led that trip 1 year. It's a great trip. It was a lot of fun. So that's our study abroad. Now, these are one last thing to say about study abroad, because I know you guys have incredible work with study abroad. You're doing wonderful things. Just please remember, in your own study abroad trips, if you let me know where you're going, I can connect you to that Natural Resource Center, and they can help you with resources. Films, speakers, help you plan a follow-up workshop. So just keep that in mind. Even if it's not our trip, if you're doing your own trip, we can still work with you on that. Speaker series. We have a couple of free speaker series. One is called Carolina Speakers. One is called TIS, Triangle Institute for Security Studies. They will send speakers to speak to your, generally if it's these, they would rather speak to a group larger than a classroom. So it'd be good if you get several classes together. And it's free. I can help you with that. I got a call from Forsyth Tech a couple years ago because these are just general speaker series, but I then went through them and pulled out the international speakers and the better international speakers. So just give me a call and I can put you in that area. And then one of the projects I'm working on is we call it Worldview to You, where we're going to just put together a stable of global speakers that can come to your college. I think that's all I need to say about that. International film, I'm a real movie buff. That's actually one way I learned Chinese. When I was first in Taiwan, I taught English. I would go to the market, get a piece of bread, a chicken leg, and go and watch a kung fu movie, a karate movie. And I actually dreamed in Chinese before I could actually speak Chinese, just from watching all those movies. And I think it's a great way to let students experience. And so on our website, and we're redoing our website, so it'll be much better in about a month, but there are resources from the National Resource Centers where you can choose films. And one thing we're going to do in the next year is we're going to have like a webinar to help you choose films for your classes. So that's something, give me a call, email. I'll be glad to help you with that. But we do have a really good section of international films. Travel abroad, I've talked about. Now, globalizing the curriculum, as I mentioned, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's really, I think, where you make a difference in your students' lives. And we've been working on that since 2007. What I started was a small grant program where instructors send a proposal, we look at it, we fund it, and then we arrange a research visit to UNC for you to get the resources to create your module. Now, I'll say what a module is in a minute. And these are my wife is actually now the head of the East Asian Library, so I'm a bit prejudiced, but I can tell you and I've got a slide about this in a minute, but the library is one of the best resources because they have, you think books, but really it's people. And they have international specialists, and these are the same international specialists that work with our faculty. And because of this grant program, we've been doing it since 2007. We've globalized about 70 courses. And what's come out of that is a wonderful relationship between these international specialists at the UNC Library and our community college faculty. Because we arrange these visits, they come up, and they tell me the library was a lot better than the faculty in terms of the visit, in terms of helping them. So that's a great way to do this. So here's what we can offer you to help you with your curriculum. Now, and I'm going to stop in about, 5 minutes. I won't say anything more about that, but we've got the grants. We do that. We work on it at our programs. We have workshops. We can come to your college, work with you there. And I've spoken about all of these. I've spoken about the library, what a great resource it is. And if you don't want to go through this grant process, if you just got a project and you want to do something, just give me a call, tell me what you want to work on. I send it to the head of public service at the library, and then they say who to work on. So we'll be glad to arrange that for you. And if you want to come as a group, that's great too. Now, when I say globalize your course, the way we've done it, you don't have to do it this way, but we've been having people create what we call a module. And it's a self-contained unit that integrates into your course. It can be lectures, films, student projects, that just adds a global content into the course. And if you go on our website, you can see examples from what your colleagues have done across the state. I don't want to spend any more time on it. Here are some examples. When I have more time, I talk about them and say what they've done, but I won't do this now. So this is probably meaningless, but it just shows. Now, I wanted to get on to this. The culmination of all of this, which really started about 2 years ago, is what we're calling the North Carolina Global Distinction Initiative. This was the model from Maryland, Howard Community College. Stacy Korbelak, a very creative instructor who got this going. The issue, though, is it never went beyond the one college because she doesn't have a kind of cohort. And at my Globalizing the Community College Curriculum workshop, I had her come a couple years, and then I noticed some of the colleges were interested. So we've now started an initiative. These are the first 10 partners, and it's really gotten a lot of national attention. I've been asked to speak around the country. A lot of other universities are looking at doing it. And what we're actually doing is, well, this is like the marketing stuff I do, but, to 21st century skills, best practices, that kind of stuff. But what we're actually doing is the colleges that implement this, their students are going to complete 15 hours of globally intensive courses. That means one of these courses that has a global module. And we've got a definition of what a global module is. It used to be, you could also use what we call inherently global. But you know, with the new articulation agreement, that new list of courses, they wiped out most of the global courses. But I see that as a great opportunity. But anyway, these can either be courses that we've globalized as a group, or they can be inherently global courses. So they take those, they participate in 8 international activities and dialogue, speakers, films, performances, whatever. Our imagination is the only limit to this. They get global experience. This can be a study trip abroad, or it can be working with a local immigrant population. It can be working with a local NGO. It can be interning at a global company. And then they give a capstone presentation related to their global learning. And after they do this over the 2 years, they graduate with global distinction noted on the transcript. And as I was selling this to presidents around the state, there were two areas. First of all, transfer. I talked to, actually he's a friend of mine, the head of undergraduate admissions at UNC, Steve Farmer. I told him about this program. He said if we were looking at this and saw a student that had done this, they would go to the front of that particular pile. He would be very interested. And then also, a lot of the college presidents said they're visited on a regular basis by global companies that are saying, what are you doing to get your students ready to work for us? Well, bingo, this is what we're doing. We got our certificate. Other things is a dedicated advisor. The colleges are getting an advisor that work with the students. And individual initiatives. Some of the colleges say they don't want to do foreign language right now because of their resources, and we're allowing that. We're not being dictatorial about it. What we do is we're organizing and directing the initiative. We're offering the professional development, and we're offering monetary support and all of this library support and faculty support to globalize the modules, to keep the modules. And then these passport activities, these national resource centers are doing that. So this is a wonderful partnership we're doing. We'd love to have Wake Tech be a part of this, you know, because I think you're already doing a lot of interesting global stuff. So, that's it. I'm done. Okay.